Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 23rd audio chat on the Q News Patriot Rumble channel series. I am the Q News Patriot, coming to you again with my friend Dr. Kirk Elliott. My name is SG Anon. We have quite an update economically, financially, in the business energy space for you today. Things have been accelerating for a number of weeks now, and we all have sort of become intuitively and in some cases directly aware of this through the squeeze in prices, the surge once again in petrol prices here in the US and around the Western world, and the explosion of hostilities in the Middle East, which threatens to expand into a much more regional, potentially even global conflict when we consider the other areas of conflict and confrontation that are already erupting around the world. Populism is sweeping the planet in a way that has not swept the planet really ever before, certainly not in as universal of a fashion. And so what we've seen at the surface level from our WEF, UN, NATO-based deep state friends is increasing desperation, increasingly reckless acceleration of their agendas. And those agendas include everything from finance to healthcare to law and economy and many other areas of what amounts to totalitarian control in a 21st century digitized world. So here to talk a little bit about these events that are happening, a little bit about the energy crisis that's looming here in the Western world, break down the economic implications and certainly the implications of cyber attacks throughout this process, particularly originating from state actors around the world. Dr. Kirk Elliott is here joining us today to discuss these and more. And I thank you very much, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, SG. It's interesting time of the year, right? When most people are focused on the holidays and family and things that they should be, right? But this is where a lot of these horrible global systems are being put in place. And actually the foundations are being laid when nobody's paying attention. I mean, I think that's by design.
You know, I couldn't agree more. For a very long time, if we look into the history, holidays, especially Christian holidays or holidays that spread peace, love, good cheer, and the divine love of God here in the world, they've been inverted in the background by this group for a very long time. Christmas Eve, of course, being one of the largest human trafficking days of the year. Christmas Day, of course, being a similar type of event for the very dark occultists underground doing very awful, insidious things. And so these sorts of changes happening at the surface level, coinciding, like you said, when people are more focused, a little bit more distracted, their attention's being split because they want to put in the time, love, the energy, the effort, all of those things that bring about a happy holiday season for everyone. This is really an opportunistic time for the enemy powers that we face down each day to move into a more fluid, more accelerated portion of their agenda, right? We've seen this sort of already beginning with the rhetoric being ratcheted up on Trump, the obviousness of the fraud trial there, the obviousness of what's actually occurring. Different court systems around the USA still shutting down election issues, still shutting down financial lawsuits, targeting the SEC, pointing out the Leviathan levels of fraud and manipulation that the SEC seems to pick and choose in a favoristic fashion, which ones they allow and which ones they turn down and pursue and go after. And so I wanted to start our discussion today with this idea that the movement through the winter of 2023 into 2024, it's an election year, presidential year in the United States. You know, when we look at the next 90 to 120 days, so that really brings us to the close of Q1 of 2024. What do you, with the years of experience that you have, seeing what's occurring in the petrol markets, seeing what's occurring in worldwide finance, the implementation, I think we were talking off air about different patent systems that have been sought by worldwide financier organizations. What do you see happening in that area of the world as we sort of already acknowledge that it will be against the backdrop of a pandemic 2.0, a very large chaotic situation being purposefully created by these deep state actors? What do you see happening in the finance world?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, right? But so we'll try to do it bullet point style and quickly because there really is a lot. So go back to August 22nd through 24th. The BRICS nations had their meeting in Durban, South Africa, and Putin opened up on the 22nd. He said, we are going to de-dollarize the world. It's our objective and it's irreversible. It's like, those are fighting words there. How do they think they're going to do that? Well, then on the 24th, he actually kind of explained how. So on the 24th, the BRICS nations added Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates into the BRICS nations. And then come January 1st, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, basically they're going to have more than half of the top 10, like 5 of the 9 or 6 of the 9 largest oil producers in the world are going to be part of the BRICS nations come January 1st. So why does that matter? Because it's not like this is, Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname, right, making a bilateral trade agreement. This is 70% of the world's population. It's a huge trading bloc in the BRICS nations when you add China and India and everybody else that's part of that, right? Because it's not just the BRICS anymore, it's BRICS plus. There's a lot of countries in there, and that's a huge trading bloc. So they're going to trade in each other's currency that boost the demand for their currency. And what are they doing? Not trading in the dollar. That detracts from demand for the dollar. So now what? The petrodollar is the only reason, SG, that we have demand for our currency right now. That's it. We have way too much debt, $32 trillion, hundreds of trillions of dollars of unfunded future obligations. Nobody wants our currency. And so therefore, if there's no demand, built-in demand for our currency, when we have debt ceiling talks and stimulus money and our Department of Defense and education and infrastructure and handouts and welfare and entitlements and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all that stuff, we've got to print our way out of it because there is no foreign capital inflow coming in. So come January 1st, I think they actually accelerate the printing presses even more, which means rate hikes are going to come to slow down that inflation. So what else is happening in the terms of the money supply? So that money supply, they don't actually track anymore because it used to be called MZM. They don't track that. What they do track is M2. M2 money supply is liquid money in the banks, checking accounts, savings accounts, money markets. M2 money supply is coming down. It's like cratering. So why is this important? Because they're printing money to fund all the stimulus and garbage all over the world, which causes inflation. And if that money, the inflated money that they're creating would get into the hands of the people, we would spend it. It's not the case. They're taking it out of the hands of the people. So now we've got less money to spend, higher prices. This is a recipe for destruction moving into 2024. And happens to be an election year, right? So, and in times of crisis, especially economic crisis, it was Clinton that said it really well. I'd say it's the economy, stupid. People are voting with their wallets, right? So people, human nature, people will tend to give up their freedoms in exchange for perceived security and peace. And so they're going to vote for the politicians in an economic crisis that will give them the most out of the government coffers, right? I think this is what we're going to see politically in 2024. And that's right around the corner. That's only a few weeks away, right? But what else is happening is you've got this escalated tensions happening in the Middle East with the Israeli-Hamas war, right? And now that's even getting worse and worse. And you've got leaders, heads of state of different countries that are now choosing sides. This is going to probably grow from a local conflict to a regional conflict to a global conflict because you've got countries that are now choosing sides. And then in the spring, like late March, early April, what do you have? The Jewish community has Passover. What does Hamas have? Ramadan. So I wouldn't be surprised if Israel decides to attack Hamas on Ramadan, just symbolically to stick it to them. And they do the same thing back to Israel, during Passover. It's like, well, boy, this could turn out to be ugly, but these are future tense things, right? That I think will probably happen. But when you look back, I read this quote from Klaus Schwab, who's not our friend. He's a bad dude from the World Economic
Bond
Forum.
villain.
I mean, seriously. So he said this recently. He said the pandemic, referring to COVID, obviously, was a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. It's like COVID, where all these people died. You're saying that was a narrow window of opportunity, you creep? I mean, seriously? But What was it an opportunity in their mind to do? To reimagine and reset our world. So something as ugly as COVID, which shut down economies, shelter in place laws, mask laws, people lost their businesses, they lost their livelihood, they lost their lives, a lot of people. And then you've got people running scared and saying, oh, give me every booster under the sun because we need it. It's like, it's the flu, people. It's the flu. You don't need all that garbage. But anyways, they saw it was a test. And he said it here. It was this opportunity, this brief time to reflect on how to reimagine and reset the world. So they wanted to see how much it would take for the global populace and here in America to actually comply and give up their freedoms, right? Well, they found out. Didn't take much. It really didn't take much for people to give up everything. So what could be worse than COVID? How about a complete reset of your finances, right? Where you no longer are in charge of your ability to buy or sell. They are. And it's based on your ideology. If it doesn't match up, well, then you can't buy or sell. Well, to me, that sounds eerily similar to the mark of the beast in Revelation, right? But these are out of the mouths of Dr. Pippa Malmgren of the World Economic Forum at the World Government Summit in Abu Dhabi. She said, people's ability to buy or sell programmable money is going to be tied to their digital social profile. Then you add in social credit scores and ESGs, right? Through the Bank for International Settlements, Project Aurora, Project Icebreaker, they've said, we're not going to send wires from bank to bank if your ideology doesn't match up. And I mean, this just goes on and on and on. So I looked back, and this isn't a new thing, right? This was starting to be planned out well before COVID, right? So there's a bill, HR 6321, introduced by Maxine Waters in March of 2020. So what's the title of this bill of HR 6321? It's protecting consumers, renters, homeowners, and people experiencing homelessness. All right, so obviously this is a stimulus bill and they want to help people out with handouts, right? So then it goes on to Section 101. Direct stimulus payments for families has to be done with a digital dollar. The digital dollar has to be done through a digital dollar wallet, through a member bank that accepts digital dollar wallets and digital dollars, right? And the payments are going to be done. The Secretary of the Treasury, acting through the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, shall make monthly emergency payments via these mechanisms of a digital dollar through a digital dollar wallet. What did they just explain? The FedNow app, central bank digital currency. If you want, so here's another test. If they're saying, if you want government payments of any sort, you're going to have to do it through this central bank digital currency, through this digital dollar, right? So now apply this to Social Security, government pensions. I see anything that's going to be government related income stream for people is going to have to be done digitally. Okay. So that prior to that bill, at the U.S. Patent Office, you can search for patents that are being done. Well, there's an interesting one. November 8th of 2019. What was it, or who was the applicant for this particular patent? Visa, the credit card company. Well, what's the abstract? What in the little kind of abstract and what this patent was covering? Here, I'll read it to you, okay? So here's the abstract. And what this patent covers is techniques are disclosed which include receiving by a central entity computer a request for digital currency. The request includes a serial number and a denomination of the physical currency. The central entity computer generates the digital currency for the denomination linked to the serial number, and then generating includes recording the digital currency over a blockchain. The central entity computer transmits a notification of the generation of the digital currency. Here's the key sentence. The central entity computer then causes removal of the physical currency from circulation in a fiat currency system. So they're going to get rid of paper currency, going to digital currency where they can track everything you buy, your habits, who you give to, who you donate to, what your political party is, what you eat, all of that. They're going to be able to tell because it's a digital currency that can be tracked. They have to remove private paper currency from the system because they don't want private transactions being done. Their whole agenda here is control of all people. The best way to control a person is to control what they buy or sell, what they spend their money on, right? So this, and if people who are listening want to look, it's publication number US 2020/0151682A1. That's the patent number, right? It's like, good grief. So prior to COVID, they were trying to come up with something that they knew there was going to be a lot of opposition to, that was going to eliminate people's freedoms, just like COVID did. So they used COVID as a test to see how far they could go and how long it would take for people to comply. They found out it didn't take very long, and it didn't take much. So I believe this is what's coming next. And oddly enough, just last week, Bank of America, second largest bank in America, said that they've got their digital wallet ready and it's going to be implemented between basically now and January 19th. It's like, okay, things are happening. It's a supernatural clip. And the reason why I bring this up is not to scare people. It's to give people hope, because there is a solution that you can do to actually get you out of this beast system. I truly believe this is a beast monetary system, into something that's private that you can protect and preserve and grow and thrive with.
Incredible. And thank you very much for listing the patent and the document numbers there. And I just want to highlight out there for the audience, as we continue to delve more into these discussions, not only on this program, but really all around the rest of the world, all through the broadcasting and digital cyberspace, we continually erode the ability of this agenda to roll out and capture people, right, in the same fashion that the surprise for COVID, or what amounted to the surprise for most of the people in the world that was COVID, sort of caught everyone off guard, right? It was a moment where we had to push back on our heels, acknowledge that there were very strong storm winds coming our way that really weren't anticipated at that level. And then we had to appreciate the gravity of what was actually occurring. And so now we have a little bit of a ahead of the eight balls type of scenario, right? What would we do? For example, if we could rewind ourselves back in time to the summer of 1929 or to the spring of 1929, what sort of signs were being thrown off at that time? What could people have done had they had the lighthouse off in the distance telling them that something was coming, something very bad was coming, and that they needed to prepare for it? And so this entire process is in my opinion, and Dr. Kirk, I'll get your take on this in just a minute, but it seems to be that it's interconnected across nation states, primarily based in the digital information cyber apparatus, right? The transition from this physical kinetic way of life more into a hybrid way of life, if we could use the term, and I use it loosely, discussing physical kinetic exchange, but also essentially the entire machinations of merchantry and commerce being conducted in the digital space, right? And they're preparing, in my own estimation, to bring us to something along these lines in the digital space, coinciding very likely with other events around the world, to try and throw us back into that programming, to throw us back into that fearful reactivity complex, that frightfulness that has never served us, only amounts to narrow our point of view, increase the anxiety within our chest, and shut down our ability to logically reason during a crisis in the moment. An article back from 2021 discussed how the IMF, along with 10 other countries, simulated a cyber attack on the global financial system that actually was led out of Israel. It was led out of Jerusalem by the Israel Ministry of Finance. And so what we've got going on in the world right now is it seems eerily prescient to that particular exercise, right? We're looking at a possible Arab coalition aligning themselves against the Jewish state. As you pointed out earlier, there are several different significant faith-based events, feast days, holidays, etc., that are on the horizon not very far from now. This current conflict launched on Yom Kippur, which is one of the holiest days in all of Judaism. And so then to think that a possible worldwide attack on the banking system, right, coming out of this conflict, or being spawned off by ancillary actors that are part and party to this conflict, and certainly tying back into the worldwide energy markets with the amount of raw resources that come out of the Middle East and are serviced to the rest of the world. are we beyond the pale to say that this event going on in the Middle East, these series of events, and then when you add in the conflict in Eastern Europe, the potential brewing conflict in the Pacific with China, the destabilization, disconnection of the sub-Saharan African continent, and all of the raw resources that they provide to the NATO war machine, are we completely out of bounds to say that this seems to have all of the hallmarks of setting up what amounts to a collapse of worldwide energy markets in their current form?
No, I don't think you're out of line at all. Before I answer that, I need to make a correction to something I said. That number that I gave you on the patent, that was the publication number. The patent number, for anybody who wants to look it up, is 62/758430. I just wanted to make that correction. So gave the publication number. But to answer that question, there was a confirmation this week of recession. And it's like, so a lot of the people on mainstream media, the who are following says, oh, we're a recession is coming. It's like, okay, you morons, we've been in a recession for a while. A recession is just 2 quarters of declining output and production. It's like we've been in that since 2020 with COVID. I mean, we're in a depression is what we're in. But what the confirmation is, declining oil prices the same time that gold is going up, like 100% of the time, sign of a recession. Well, we've got both, right? So, but we're not going to have both for long. See, because what comes next is, now that Iran is flexing a little bit and trying to show off to the BRICS nations and coaxing OPEC to cut production by 2.2%. OPEC is 40% of all oil production globally. So when they cut production, what's that going to mean? Economics 101 kicks in, which is low supply, high demand, prices go up, right? So who benefits from higher prices? How about the 6 new members or how about all of the BRICS nations, where now they have the 6 largest oil producers in the world as part of the BRICS, right? So when oil prices go up, they receive the benefit of higher prices. And who pays? Us, because we are not oil independent in America. We're dependent on foreign oil because of environmental restrictions, because of the green, environmental movement that says, no, you can't drill in the Arctic because there's a migrating moose population or a caribou herd, right? It's like they won't know what to do if they run into an oil rig. It's like, okay, I'm not part of that movement, but somehow, some way, I think animals are smarter than what these animal lovers are giving them credit for. It's like, if I were a migrating moose and there was something in the way, I'd walk around it, SG. I'd walk around it. They're smarter than that, right? So, and you can't drill, you can't actually have oil rigs in the Gulf. No, you can't have any more refinery capacity in America. Oh, you can't cross drill. You can't do fracking. You can't. Well, because of all those can'ts, we are not oil independent in America. We're dependent on foreign oil. Well, then over the last year, Biden decided, hey, also let's eliminate the strategic oil reserve and use it all. Well, what's that reserve for? Times of war. So we're entering into a global conflict, and you know what? Our strategic oil reserve is like empty. And now we've got to refill it with higher prices that are coming because Iran caused OPEC to cut production. Everything that this administration doing is stupid. Or is it? I think it's stupid. You think it's stupid. We all think it's stupid. They are doing this on purpose to create a conflict that's so bad that people will give up their freedoms in exchange for perceived security and peace, right? They have a different agenda than us. That doesn't make them stupid. It makes them evil, right? So this is where I think that we're headed moving into this upcoming year. These energy prices are going to be the Achilles heel of our economy. Moving into 2024, during an election year, it's always politically chaotic, right? Always. But this is going to be different. This is going to be political chaos on steroids this year. And you've got all those conflicts that you talked about, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Asian Pacific Rim, all happening all at once. How are we going to spread ourselves out? Because America's, foreign policy is going to want to have its fingers in Eastern Europe. We're going to want to have our fingers in the Middle East. We're going to want to have our fingers in China, right? By design, maybe these are all happening at the same time because we can't afford it, especially when we lost our petrodollar status for all intents and purposes come January 1st. The rest of the countries of the world, especially the BRICS nations, China and Russia, know that we're going to have to print our way out of it. That's going to cause inflation. It's going to harm our economy. We're going to have to raise rates even further to slow down that inflation. That's the automatic policy adjustment to inflation, is to raise rates to slow it down. They know that. They're playing a masterful chess game of economic warfare. Our current administration showed up to the chess game with their checkers board saying, wait, wrong game and much less complex. And we're going to lose because of that. I mean, they truly are. They already dismantled our reserve currency status. They're already dismantling our petrodollar status. And now here we are. What does it mean for us when we no longer have that built-in demand for our currency? Well, SG, we're no different than Venezuela or Argentina or Zimbabwe or Weimar Republic Germany after World War I. When you lose international demand for your currency and you still have expenses, you're going to print your way out of it. That causes hyperinflation. That's the road that we're heading down.
Incredible. A bit bleak, but actually encouraging, lined with some silver linings, if I can use the pun here, because as we look at this system disintegrating throughout the rest of the world, we're also witnessing the ability of the U.S. military-industrial complex to erode foreign policy, to affect regime change, to finance and fund different terrorist mercenary groups all around the world, right? We're witnessing that ability constrained, impinged, obstructed as well. So it really is we're sort of walking on a double-edged sword where it's, it'll cut me, but it's going to cut you worse kind of thing. I'm going to ask you two very important questions here just to lay it out for the audience, especially those that may be catching us on air for the first or second time and really haven't had much of a chance in their busy lives to go and flesh some things out about the issues that we're talking about. The first thing I want to ask is, if you were a representative in any sort of Western government, any sort of, we'll say, modern Western liberal democracy or constitutional Republican style of government, and you wanted to damage or irreparably harm a government's ability economically to keep up with all of the major machinations going on around the world, manufacturing for industrial purposes, the ability to engage in a global conflict and not be immediately bled dry, the ability to sustain a very large, what amounts to a metaphysical, if we could use the term, or an intangible siege on systems of societal way of life, like commerce, economy, point of sale, transactional systems, etc. Would you do anything differently than what's occurring right now in the world before our very eyes?
If I wanted to make it worse or I wanted to fix it?
If you were seeking to cause the system to be irreparably harmed and permanently changed?
Boy, I mean, what else could we do to make it worse? Actually, accelerate the war machine. I mean, really, if they go to war anywhere, chemical warfare, nuclear bomb goes off somewhere, boom, lights out, everyone is paralyzed with fear, they're gripped by it. Fear causes two things. Neither of these are good things, because here we have to remember, God did not create us with a spirit of fear, but with a spirit of sound mind, judgment, self-control, creativity, right? So fear will cause people to not act or to make the wrong decision. So they're already doing a really good job economically. They're already doing a pretty good job with war and striking fear into the hearts and minds of people. So what they have to do is actually either go to war physically, or you have to kick the US dollar out of the sandbox a little bit quicker. Because, see, they're doing a good job on replacing the US dollar, coming up with an alternative, but the US dollar is still playing in the sandbox with the BRICS nations, right? So you got to kick it out altogether. How do you do that? Completely erode the demand for it. If you completely erode demand for the US dollar by having all international trade traded in other currencies, we will be forced to actually print like Zimbabwe, print like Venezuela. See, people forget it was only 2 years ago. This isn't like ancient history. Venezuela had 1,000,000% inflation in 1 year, right? 50 years ago, it was the fourth largest economy in the world because of all the oil. It's not like they're not used to being wealthy. This is what happens when you have bad policy and you have communist dictatorships that start to take over, right? So dismantle the US dollar, get rid of it, and go to war. I think that would accelerate the move to what they're wanting to do, which is complete command and control takeover of our finances.
Well, I appreciate the question because it sets up very saliently, I think, the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is acknowledging that all of this is occurring. I think having the open discussion with the distinct probability at this point, I would even elevate it past possibility, the probability, especially for the normie out there that's witnessing a broadcast like this, maybe hearing this content for the first time, that all of these movements at the economic, industrial, at the international relations level, they're all being done by design to cripple not only the United States financial markets, but also the Western NATO military apparatus as a whole. Which for those of us that are within those nations, right, we the people that are contained within those borders, that's a very concerning and worrisome situation to be in, right? It's sort of being exposed in a way that one has never been exposed before. So coming through this, we know that these crises will break off. We know that these things, the push for a central bank digital currency system is coming. We've been talking about this since early summer of this year. The chaos that I think is awaiting us at the surface level here in the world and during this 2024 election season, which we've gotten into recently on this channel, and I think certainly other different talking heads within the online space across all different ideologies and divisions can see. Even Tucker Carlson described recently on an interview with Alex Jones that this is all building to an inevitability. There is a point where the gloves sort of have to come off on both sides, and one or both or all of, if we can be that inclusive, of the actors that are participating in this sort of charade and masquerade against we the people, marching our societies towards this global totalitarian superstate. They're going to have to make very plain efforts, right? And we're going to see those efforts. We've talked about those efforts here. But let me ask you this: beyond the other side of that, we know that we can protect ourselves economically to some degree with raw, assets that are here, given of God here in the world, right? Commodities, certainly precious metals, certainly things that have tradable, barterable value in the world, right? This is historic. This is ancient wisdom, right? We're not talking about anything new. But I want to ask another question that I've not gotten into really on air with you before, and I think it would be very important as we move through the Christmas season, the New Year's season, the winter season for the Patriots out there to have an idea of what reorienting the system, reimagining the system here at home really looks like. We've talked a little bit about decentralized banking at the sovereign state level here in the United States. I think the concept is very, very well founded. But if you were to be appointed to some position that had considerable influence, say Secretary of the Treasury, a board advisor on the Federal Reserve Bank, things of this nature, what are the things based on your history, the education that you've got in the precious metal space, certainly the exposure to worldwide financial systems, what would you implement as policy or as corrective action here in the United States to turn the boat around?
I mean, it's simple. I would go back to pre-1913 banking, which, the Federal Reserve Act was devastating. That's why we have all the debt that we have today. Prior to that, you actually had a currency that was backed by gold, which means you couldn't actually print more currency unless you had the gold backing it, right? Even if you did print more currency and it was 1-to-1, well, then the value of gold would go up. So it causes accountability and transparency in money creation, right? Which holds politicians in check. So I would actually have a gold-backed currency. And you know what? This is such an interesting question that you asked because, you've got central banks around the world that are poo-pooed gold forever. It's like it's an ancient relic. It's stupid. Why don't you actually just have Keynesian type economics where we can control the money supply, we can control interest rates, grow or slow down the economy at will, right? But that creates boom and bust cycles, like von Mises said, and this is a problem. So that's what they say. But I always tell people, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Because a lot of times it tells a different story, the real story. Actions always speak louder than words. So the Chinese central bank they lie about everything, right? But the estimate is that they've got 5,000 tons of gold backing up their stuff. That's a lot of tons, right? Now, it could be as high as 4 times that, 20,000 tons. Because the last time that they actually had an official measurement, I think it was 2009, they had 2,000 tons. Estimates are it could be 10 times greater, so maybe 20,000 tons. But remember that number, because the European Central Bank has 10,500 tons of gold. The Federal Reserve has 8,500 tons. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan all have a couple hundred tons plus. Russia has 1,000 tons of gold. Turkey has 600 tons of gold. India has in that amount. It's like, wait a second. I thought all these places were poo-pooing gold, but yet why are they amassing it by the tons, right? So China, this is an interesting case study. More mining of gold than even South Africa. They're the largest gold mining country in the world. They're also the largest purchaser of gold, but they're not sellers of it. Everything they mine, they keep. They're also the largest purchaser. They are amassing mountains of gold. And to what end? What do you need gold for if you're going to have a central bank digital currency, right? Well, maybe they're saying, this is a complete loss of freedom. We're seeing what states in the United States are doing, and they're going to, Texas wants a state chartered bank backed by gold. The rest of the world, the Dutch central bank, 2 weeks ago, SG, said that we are ready for a gold monetary standard. It's like, what do you mean they're ready? They've got gold back. They're ready for an international gold standard. So behind the scenes, kind of like the Sun Tzu War Academy books, right? It's like, they're creating something, and they'll spring it on everybody when they least expect it. So maybe they realize there's going to be a lot of opposition to central bank digital currency, and they're amassing gold because we possibly can go to a real tangible when things really collapse, and we have gold-backed money again, right? And so the BRICS nations have more gold than the European Union and the United States combined. Right. So it's an attack against the West. But this is what I would do. And actually, a lot of these central bankers are doing the something. I can't figure out why, when they obviously want complete people control through central bank digital currency, but yet for their own wealth, they're gobbling up gold. And maybe that's the answer. They're just greedy, and they know what's going to go through the roof in times of chaos. And they're amassing gold, not by the ounce or by the pound or by the ton, but literally by the hundreds and thousands of tons. That's a lot of gold. So if it were me investing in today's world, I would not listen to what they say. I would watch what they do. We can do the same thing, SG. We can do the same thing as central bankers are doing to protect their own back corners, right? Is okay. They're amassing gold by the ton. We can't afford to do that, but we can sure do it by the ounce. We can surely do silver by the ounce, or 10-ounce bars, or 100-ounce bars, right? So start doing what they're doing at the scale that you can afford to do so. This is how you start to protect and preserve and grow and thrive. But policy, that's individual. Policy-wise as a nation, which is what your first question was, simply put, I would have a tangible backed currency that would add transparency and accountability back into a system that absolutely nobody trusts, right?
That's a fascinating answer, and I suspected that it might be something along those lines, but it speaks to an eternal truth. When you have a standard of value, when you have a standard of measurement, whether it's an inch, a centimeter, a volumetric measurement like a milliliter, or something that provides a universal reference point for all of humanity, you essentially eliminate the ability, especially when it's very well overseen, you eliminate the ability to manipulate whatever that particular standard of value is based off of, or is based to, because everyone can look back to it and realize and instantly see the manipulation, right? It's one of the reasons the BRICS nations are saying, no, you cannot trade with us unless you have something that's asset backed, something that you can show us to prove that you're not going to basically dump your currency and flood the economic block, the trading block that is the BRICS nations, with the same sort of manipulative behavior that has occurred within the North American financial markets. Even President Trump talking about currency dumping, manufacturing dumping, things of this nature, going back several decades. Excuse me, most recently out of China, but it's come from all over the world, right? So I really appreciate the answer to the question, because I think that it speaks to the broader truth, which is we have to have something that provides honesty. We have to have something that compels the individuals that are elected by we the people, assuming that we can get them elected lawfully. And that's a completely different discussion on this issue, right? But it is an important component of it.
Right.
But for the sake of the hypothesis, if we get them elected lawfully, we now have to insulate their honor. We have to insulate their integrity. We cannot, Jesus said, tempt not the Lord, right? Don't go in and, or maybe it wasn't Jesus. I forget where that quote comes from. I think it's the Old Testament, but, don't tempt fate, I think is the wisdom that's found within that, right? When we know that things like money, things like the ability to transact value, they lead directly to higher standards of living, very desirable outcomes for all involved, right? In the middle of a system that has been built for the last 1,000 years to encourage suffering and to maximize poverty. We have to acknowledge that human nature is simply human nature. And sometimes we need a little bit of insulative coating. We need a little bit of a security blanket, if we will, when we look at those pulpits of power that are going to affect how the world actually operates. Another great example could be term limits, right? But that's more of the political constitutional discussion rather than the financial. But certainly preventing the ability of mass large amounts of finance, right, to go in and manipulate government seats of power, to go in and manipulate the actions of corporations, hedge funds with trillions and trillions of fiat dollars underneath their management portfolio, controlling the social direction, the cultural expectation of an entire society, right? This is not a sustainable model, regardless of that word that they love to use so much. It is not a self-fulfilling situation whatsoever. It leads to a zero-sum game of we the people being permanently impoverished and enslaved, while those that are in control of those entities, in control of those government levers of power, continue to benefit from the fact that there is no integrity in the monetary supply, right? There is no oversight. There's no fail safe. There's no check and balance. And so what you described is literally the penultimate example of a check and balance, not only on economy, but also on every other system that helps society function, that emanates from that relationship between government policy, government law, and economy. So that being said, Dr. Kirk, I really appreciate the time today. I really have appreciated this discussion a whole lot. It is true that we can do things, where we're at, from where we're from, with the amounts of resources that we have available to us, right? As we go through the winter season, we have to consider things like heating, consider things like food preparation. We have to consider insulating ourselves economically. I really do believe that the issue of silver by the ounce is one of those issues that we bring up several times on this cast. I think that's very doable for individuals. An ounce here, a couple of ounces there. These things stack up over time, and what it provides us is a security blanket. It provides us the ability to go out and work, knowing that we are preparing for something. We are preparing for a change. We all know that change is coming, and we're being actively a part of it. It's akin, I think, to having a heads up about some sort of major economic event in October of 29, several months prior. So that being said, I'd like to leave the floor to you for any closing thoughts. Where can people find you, and what sort of message is important, I think, to remember as we go through the winter months here, as we stare down this economic shift that's happening in the world, especially those of us that are here at home in the United States with the Hydra in our living room. What are the things that we can do, and what do we need to keep in mind and remember as we go forward here?
First of all, don't operate out of fear, because fear will cause you to not act, right? So first thing to do would just be give us a call, right? And 720-605-3900, or you can go to the web form that we filled out, made for the show. It's kirkelliottphd.com/SG, and just request a free consultation. What will happen in that is we'll ask you some questions. What was it that SG and Kirk were talking about that caused you to want to reach out, right? And so we'll answer. We want to address your fears, your concerns, your goals, your hopes, your dreams, right? And craft a strategy moving forward where we reallocate, your positions into silver or gold, right? Tangible assets to take advantage of all these trends so those trends don't take advantage of us. See, that's what we can do to protect and preserve. This is how I can have a smile on my face, even though we talked about a lot of nasty, dark stuff today. I mean, we really did. It's awful. But yet, have a smile on my face because, yeah, the news is dark. I didn't create it, right? The politicians did. We're just identifying it so then we can be wise stewards with what God has given us and with boldness and courage and faith, move forward and craft a strategy moving forward that takes advantage of those trends so they don't take advantage of us. So just give us a call, 720-605-3900, or go to kirkelliottphd.com/SG, and we'll take really good care of you and answer your questions and move forward together.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that the discussion today has been informative and helpful. We have covered a broad area of topic matter. We have covered a very large arena of content, but it is important, I think, to bring all of these together to inform the entirety of the situation, right? When entities like Q come out and say that Drain the Swamp is not just about Washington, D.C., we have to acknowledge that this locus of control that exists in the financial world in the background and has existed for a very long time is able to shift policy, shift the balances of power in the world, and those actually have a material and meaningful impact on our daily lives, right down to our communities. And so we do have to have the open dialogue. We have to be aware of these things. And to the extent that it's possible, we have to sort of beat back the system, disconnect from it. You hear patriots all the time talking about disconnecting from the beast. Don't allow the system, don't give it any more of our time, attention, effort, money, energy than we're absolutely required to. And Dr. Kirk, I really appreciate the things that you're doing to help take the fight right back to what amounts to a worldwide hydra that seeks total digital transhumanistic enslavement of humanity. Thank you very much for your work. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Audio Chat 23. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll be back with each of you again soon on the Q News Patriot. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.